Every border guard had to deal with this reality. Roland Eggersdorfer monitored the border from a watchtower like this one. He was a border guard at age 19.
Der Kampfauftrag hieß ja, Grenzverletzer festzunehmen.
The combat mission was either to arrest or destroy. Everyone was aware of that at all times. So what would one have done? Looking back, I would have shot. This is how we were educated. We were taught that those wanting to escape were all criminals. The greatest fear? Whenever we went back to the barracks after duty, we said, "Thank God, I didn't have to shoot." Or "Thank God, no special incidents in my section."
The border guards didn't want to have to shoot. The guards started thinking, what else can I build into this wall? Alarms, telephone installations, public address systems. All these ideas were developed by the guards themselves, and their ideas were presented to the Minister for National Defense. He looked at them and said, "Good, we can do that." Or, "No good, we can't do that."
The wall rapidly evolved. Many buildings close to it were demolished, and the wall was fortified with a hinterland fence, usually about 150 feet behind it. The space between became the death strip. A few openings in the wall let small numbers of people and cars through between the two halves of the city. Checkpoint Charlie was an American border crossing point. Today, at the site of Checkpoint Charlie, a museum records the strange history of the wall. Even the original white line that divided East and West Berlin, painted by Hagen Koch, is preserved. And so are some very clever escape devices.
As the wall became more sophisticated, more human ingenuity was needed to get across it. Some escapers converted an Isetta, an Italian bubble car, by tinkering with the engine, tinkering with the fuel tank to make it much smaller, just enough to get a human being concealed in it. Because it was so small and so cramped, the East German border guards waved it through because it was clearly impossible to hide a human being in it. And they were wrong because it was used several times.
To avoid the border guards altogether, groups of students started tunneling under the death strip. It was not easy, as tunnel organizer Hasso Herschel recalls.
It is quite difficult to do, because the tunnel requires a certain depth. It has to go under building foundations and below the sewer system, 12 to 18 feet deep. You could only do that with the help of a lot of people. Around 48 worked on our tunnel. There was a core of about 8 to 12, but we always had the support of other students.
More than one tunnel was dug. Tunneling was such a large undertaking that some individuals specialized in raising money. Men such as Wolfgang Kochrow, who started fundraising by approaching a ministry in the West German government.
I could help with 30,000 marks, and this money I get from the Ministry of Family and Refugee. Then we need money for technical things, for electric lines. They need gas mask, they need police blue flashlights, walkie-talkies, and so on. The tunnel was 3 feet high and 2 feet wide. 10 students live there in the tunnel for 1 week or 10 days, sleeping there, eating there, working there.
Lookouts were posted, and the comings and goings of tunnelers minimized to avoid arousing suspicion.
The tunnel was open for 2 nights, and at least 57 people came through the tunnel, and so the name Tunnel 57.
All the tunnels under the wall followed the same pattern. They were dug from West Berlin to the east, because nobody could have kept tunnel building secret in the heavily patrolled border areas of East Berlin. And after the initial hole was dug, they headed upwards to make the job of bringing out the spoil easier by creating a downhill run for it. Hasso-Hirschl worked on Tunnel 29.
We had started digging in the west in the premises of an old empty factory. The basements were big and were no longer being used. There was only one entrance. The owner handed us the keys and said, "Go ahead, guys, I know nothing."
Ich weiß von nichts.
When we started the tunnel, we ran into various small difficulties, with getting rid of the debris as well as with the air supply. But the further we got, the worse it became. The problems quadrupled. In order to have sufficient air, we bought a pump and sucked in fresh air from the outside through stovepipes. Each pipe was about 3 feet long, and we put them together, one to another, as we got further.
The pumps were financed by NBC Television in return for film rights. The tunnel needed a steady supply of oxygen. It was over 400 feet long. It would take over 6 months to dig. As they dug, they sometimes hit water mains and flooded the tunnel. Even after pumping out, the tunnel would take weeks to dry. Then it was back to work. There was an ever-present threat of the border guards discovering the tunnel and destroying it.
We knew they had these small tear gas candles. They would tie about 40 together and throw them in. Bundled together, they were like a hand grenade. If one goes off, you look stupid.
The tunnel broke through into the courtyard of this building. The border guards did not intervene, and escapers started to emerge into the west. 29 people crawled through the tunnel to freedom.
The most important thing was my sister, my brother-in-law and my niece, who was a year old at that time. I had promised that I would try absolutely everything to get them across.
Once the friends and relatives of the tunnelers had made it through, they sealed Tunnel 29. But even as the last people climbed out, the East German government was developing new machines to find tunnels under the wall.
Das Interessante ist ja, in dieser Bernauer Straße hat es Anfang der 60er.
The interesting thing is that in Bernauer Straße at the beginning of the 1960s there were tunnels. And these documents contain the order that a searching device for tunnels should be developed, capable of finding holes and cavities in the ground.
Mit der Aufgabe, die Aufklärung von Tunnelanlagen und anderen Hohlräumen, diese werden nicht.
Such a machine was never put into service. Tunneling stopped in the middle of the 1960s because the death strip was constantly being widened. So they had to dig increasingly long tunnels.